Deer versus elk, who would reign supreme in the wild? They both have elegant limbs, soulful eyes, and an uncanny ability to disappear into the forest like magic. They're both herbivores from the Cervidae family, munching away at grasses, shrubs, and the occasional tender sapling. But when it comes down to a head-to-head in the wild, who has the edge? The nimble white-tailed deer or the towering, testosterone-charged elk? Let's start with the obvious: size. If you've ever stood next to an elk, you know it's like facing a forest linebacker. A mature bull elk can weigh over 700 pounds and stand nearly 5 feet tall at the shoulder. Now compare that to a white-tailed deer buck, which maxes out around 300 pounds lightweight in comparison. So if we're talking brute strength, no contest, elk take the crown. But don't count out the deer just yet. What deer lack in mass, they make up for in agility. These guys are lightning fast, capable of bounding 30 feet in a single leap and sprinting at speeds over 35 miles per hour. I once watched a whitetail outmaneuver a pack of coyotes in the Ozarks, ducking and dodging through the underbrush like it was built for parkour. And in a way it is. So, what happens if these two ever cross paths? Fun fact, they rarely do, at least not in the same social circles. Elk prefer wide-open meadows and mountain slopes, where their bugling calls echo at dawn. White-tailed deer are more low-key, sticking to denser woods and edge habitats where they can blend into the shadows and avoid attention. It's like the elk is the loud, swaggering quarterback and the deer is the stealthy track star who graduates early with honors. Now here's something most people don't realize. The personalities of these two animals are just as different as their habitats. Elk are bold. During the fall rut, bulls will scream their lungs out, thrash bushes with their antlers, and even charge each other head-on in thunderous battles. I once had to duck behind a tree while filming two elk bulls go at it in Colorado, antlers clashing like medieval jousters. Deer bucks, on the other hand, are a bit more strategic. Sure, they'll fight, but it's usually quick, decisive, and way less dramatic. Think jiu-jitsu versus sumo wrestling. What about antlers? Elk antlers are massive, often stretching over 4 feet wide. They're majestic, intimidating, and basically the crown of the mountain monarch. But deer antlers are nothing to sneeze at either. Though smaller, they're intricately branched and perfectly designed for quick, efficient combat in tight quarters. One's a broadsword, the other's a switchblade. In terms of survival smarts, white-tailed deer might just have the upper hand. They've adapted brilliantly to suburban environments, dodging traffic, eating garden roses, and showing up on Ring cameras like local celebrities. Elk, they're still more reclusive, though we're starting to see them edge closer to towns in places like Montana and Utah. As a wildlife biologist, I can tell you this: if I were to bet on survival over generations, I might put my money on the deer. But if we're talking about a face-off in raw power, elk would leave deer in the dust. So, who really wins? It depends on the arena. In the open plains, the elk is king. But in the shadowy woods, the deer rules with quiet grace and lightning reflexes. Next time you're out hiking and you hear the high-pitched blow of a deer warning its herd, or the eerie bugle of a bull elk echoing across a canyon, ask yourself this: if these two legends of the forest had to face off not just in strength, but in wits, endurance, and adaptability, who would you choose to back? Because in the wild, it's not just about who's bigger. It's about who's smarter, faster, and more in tune with their world. Would you bet on the brute or the ninja? Deer versus elk, what's the real difference between these forest royalty? Step into the wild woodlands of North America or the grassy plains of Eurasia, and you'll probably spot one of two majestic creatures trotting through the trees with the grace of ballet dancers and the muscle of NFL linebackers. But wait, was that a deer or an elk? Are they the same? Who's faster? Who's stronger? And which one would you rather meet on a misty morning hike? Let's set the record straight, because despite the similar looks, these two animals are as different as a nimble gymnast and a heavyweight boxer. Let's talk about what people often call deer. In the US, we usually mean white-tailed deer or mule deer. Think of them as the mid-sized sports cars of the forest. Mule deer, in particular, are common in the western states, sporting those big mule-like ears and spring-loaded legs that help them leap like they're in a Mountain Dew commercial. And don't let their slender frame fool you. These animals are built for survival. They can vanish into a thicket like smoke and have the kind of situational awareness most security cameras would envy. Now let's look at elk, also technically deer, but on an entirely different level. These are the giants, the redwoods of the deer family. If mule deer are your athletic cross-country runners, elk are the powerlifters with antlers. A fully grown bull elk can weigh over 700 pounds, stand over 5 feet at the shoulder, and carry a rack of antlers that looks like a medieval weapon. And during the rut, or mating season, these animals become downright dramatic. They'll bugle so loudly that you'll feel it in your chest, then charge each other like jousting knights in a forest coliseum. I once watched a bull elk in Yellowstone lock antlers and spin in circles for nearly 5 minutes, mud flying, tourists gasping, cameras clicking like crazy. So, which one is nicer? Here's where things get interesting. White-tailed deer and mule deer are usually shy and skittish. If they sense you, they're gone bounding away, with that signature white tail flashing like a warning flag. Elk, on the other hand, are more likely to stand their ground, especially during rut. Get too close to a dominant bull, and you might find yourself being warned off with a sharp glare and a lowered head. Trust me, that's not a bluff. I've had to duck behind a log more than once while filming in Colorado during the fall rut. But size and aggression aside, these animals have very different lifestyles. Deer are browsers. They'll nibble on shrubs, acorns, fruits, and even garden plants if you happen to live in suburbia. Elk, being bigger, are grazers. They need more calories, so they go for grass in open meadows or forest edges, often in large herds. And boy, can they eat. A single elk can consume over 15 pounds of vegetation a day. That's like mowing your backyard with your mouth. In terms of looks, both are stunning. Mule deer have those black tipped tails and oversized ears. Elk have a golden brown coat and a dark, shaggy neck, giving them an almost regal appearance. And those antlers. A young mule deer buck might sport a cute little forked rack, while a mature bull elk is basically carrying a tree crown on his head. Here's something I love pointing out when leading tour. Elk and deer are both part of the same family, Cervidae, but their personalities, behaviors, and roles in their ecosystems are so different. It's almost like comparing a bobcat to a mountain lion. They might share DNA, but their stories are entirely their own. So the next time you see a graceful animal dart across the road or hear a wild, echoing bugle in the mountains, ask yourself, was that the sleek escape artist known as a deer or the muscular monarch we call elk? And if they ever ended up in a wildlife showdown, not a fight, but a contest of speed, brains, strength, and survival instincts, who do you think would win? Would you bet on the elegant shadow or the powerful storm? Nature doesn't make it easy to choose. That's why it's so fun to wonder. Who's the true heavyweight of the forest? Let's talk looks and size. When you're walking through a quiet meadow at dawn and a shadow moves between the trees, how do you know if you're looking at a sleek deer or a burly elk? Is it the antlers, the size, the attitude? Let's break it down in a way you won't forget, because these two may be cousins. But when it comes to appearance, they're on very different ends of the forest runway. Picture a deer, say a mule deer or a chital. These guys are the graceful marathoners of the wild. They stand about 3 to 4 feet tall at the shoulder and weigh between 130 to maybe 280 pounds at most. That might sound big, but out in the wild, it's considered lightweight. Their antlers are elegant, often with thin, delicate forks that branch off like the arms of a silver candelabra. And the rest of their body, streamlined, lean, built for quick getaways and sneaking through underbrush without making a sound. Their long, slender legs work like nature's springs. I've seen mule deer leap a fence like it wasn't even there, then disappear into the brush before I could get my camera focused. Now contrast that with the elk. This animal doesn't sneak anywhere, it strides. A mature bull elk can reach 5 feet tall at the shoulder, with some tipping the scales at over 700 pounds. That's like having a compact car step out of the woods and stare you down. And those antlers, forget delicate. Elk antlers are thick, massive, and heavily branched, often spanning over 4 feet across. They don't just grow antlers, they wear crowns. And then there's the body type. Elk are tank-like. Broad chest, powerful neck, and muscle-packed legs. Their fur is often darker and denser too, especially around the neck, where it forms a shaggy mane that makes them look like the medieval kings of the Rockies. They don't blend in like deer do, they own the space they walk in. To put it in human terms, if a deer is your nimble yoga instructor who jogs trails for fun, The elk is the heavyweight wrestler who eats protein by the pound and can push down a sapling just by leaning on it. But the real fun comes when you see them side by side, which doesn't happen often, by the way, since they don't usually share the same turf. I remember once spotting a mule deer and an elk bull grazing in neighboring fields in Montana. The deer looked like a nimble teenager next to a fully grown linebacker. It was like nature's version of before and after going to the gym. One question people always ask me is, do those giant antlers weigh them down? And here's the surprising part: they don't. Elk carry their antlers like it's nothing, even though a full set can weigh over 40 pounds. That's more than some kids' backpacks. And every year, they shed them and grow a fresh new set. Imagine growing a whole new bicycle helmet on your head every spring. Personally, I'm always a little more awestruck by the elk. The sheer power, the presence, the bugling calls, it's unforgettable. But deer, with their quiet grace and sleek beauty, have their own kind of magic. They move like ghosts when they want to, and if you're lucky enough to spot one standing still in morning mist, it can feel like something out of a fairy tale. So next time you see a set of antlers rising above tall grass, don't just guess. Ask yourself, is this the forest's nimble acrobat or its commanding heavyweight champion? And what would happen if the two ever met at a wild forest showdown? Where in the wild do they wander? Let's talk territory and real estate. You've probably seen deer grazing near suburban backyards or bounding across country roads at dusk, but have you ever wondered just how far these antlered mammals roam? And more importantly, do deer and elk, often called huge deer by folks seeing them for the first time, live in the same kinds of places? Spoiler, not exactly. Let's start with deer, our globe-trotting, habitat-hopping marvels. From the lush meadows of the Rocky Mountains to the gentle hills of Eastern Europe, and even down through the forests of Southeast Asia, deer are true citizens of the world. These animals have adapted to a wide range of environments, but they tend to favor areas where they can see predators coming and still have enough cover to vanish in a flash. Think open woodlands, grassy fields, the edge of deciduous forests, and those brushy transition zones between wild and human spaces. I've even seen mule deer casually strolling through backyards in Colorado like they were checking their mail. Their preferred homes come with a strategy: visibility. Deer like to spot danger before it gets close. Elk are built for the tough neighborhoods of nature. You'll find them in dense forests, alpine valleys, rugged mountain slopes, and windswept grasslands in the northern US, Canada, parts of Europe, and large portions of Asia. But don't let their size fool you, these animals are shockingly hardy. They thrive in places where the winters bite and the terrain challenges even the most seasoned hiker. Unlike deer, elk don't mind getting a little isolated. In fact, they often choose the tougher terrain. I once tracked a herd of elk in the snowy foothills of Wyoming in January. While I was bundled up like a burrito in 5 layers of fleece and regretting every life choice, the elk were calmly chewing lichen, steam rising from their noses like they were built from fire and frost. Incredible. Their size plays a role here. Elk can afford to lose a bit of fat during the cold months and still come out strong. Deer, being smaller and more agile, need more accessible food and slightly milder climates to stay in top shape. You might be wondering, do they ever share the same turf? Occasionally, yes. In the American West, especially in states like Montana or Colorado, it's possible to find both mule deer and elk roaming similar regions, but they usually split their real estate by altitude or density of forest. Elk move higher, go deeper into the trees, or gather in colder valleys, while deer stay closer to the edge, where there's less snow and more options to bolt. My advice: if you're out hiking and you see large tracks in the mud with a stride that says, "I'm big and I know it," you're probably walking in elk territory. If the tracks are more dainty but frequent, and you hear a rustle in the underbrush like something's watching you but doesn't want to be seen, welcome to deer country. So which species is better equipped to handle the wild extremes of the natural world? Elk may take the crown for sheer toughness, but deer win the gold for adaptability and street smarts. It's not about who's bigger or faster, it's about who knows how to make a home wherever they land. And here's the real kicker. What happens when climate change shifts these natural borders? Will elk push farther north? Will deer move into higher elevations? The map of their world is changing, and watching how these animals adapt is like seeing evolution unfold in real time. ready to follow their hoof prints into the next wild adventure. You might be surprised where they lead. What's for dinner in the wild? Let's talk deer and elk diets. Have you ever looked at a 700-pound elk and thought, what on earth does that guy eat to stay that big? Or spotted a nimble deer munching under an apple tree and wondered how it decides what's on the menu? Let me take you into the wild kitchen of these magnificent plant-powered creatures. Deer, whether it's a white-tailed in Pennsylvania or a chital in India, are nature's browsing connoisseurs. They have an incredibly diverse palate. Their diet includes grasses, leafy shrubs, berries, mushrooms, and even tree bark. Yes, you read that right, mushrooms. I've personally watched a mule deer in Colorado delicately pluck a patch of wild fungi like it was choosing a truffle. They don't just graze like cattle. They pick and choose like they're at a forest-side Whole Foods. One of the most fascinating things about deer is how mobile their appetites are. They follow the seasons like they're reading a gourmet travel blog. In spring, they chase tender shoots and wild flowers. Come summer, they're all about fresh fruit and lush leaves. Autumn, acorns, apples, and anything else that fattens them up for winter. And when snow starts to fall, they don't just give up. They'll dig through drifts to get to frozen berries or nibble the outer bark off young trees. But what about the big boys elk? With their sheer size, these animals have to eat a lot more to fuel their engines. We're talking up to 20 pounds of vegetation a day for a mature bull elk. That's like eating over 80 Big Macs worth of plants. Imagine the salad bar. Elk share a similar menu with deer grasses, forbs, shrubs, and tree bark, but they tackle it on a grander scale. They're less picky and more like industrial-grade vacuum cleaners in the forest. I've seen herds of elk graze across meadows like a slow-moving lawn crew, clearing a path with those massive jaws. Now winter is when things get interesting. Wild deer might starve if their favorite shrubs are buried in snow. Elk just power through. They'll munch on rough twigs, tree bark, even dry lichen clinging to rocks. It's like surviving on freezer-burned leftovers, but it works. Their large bodies store more fat, and they digest coarse material better than deer. I once saw an elk nibble on a frozen aspen limb with the same casual attitude someone has toward a beef jerky stick. So who wins the title of best wild forager? Honestly, it depends on what you value. Deer are agile, seasonal foodies. Elk are endurance eaters who can weather tougher times. Deer go where the buffet is fresh. Elk eat what's available and just eat more of it. My advice to wildlife watchers: pay attention to what your local herd is snacking on. It tells you a lot about the health of their habitat, and frankly, it's fascinating. You'll never look at a clump of weeds or a low-hanging apple the same way again. Next time you hike through a forest and see stripped bark on a sapling or half-eaten mushrooms on a log, ask yourself, was it the nimble gourmet deer or the unstoppable elk that passed through here first? Who's the drama queen of the forest? Let's talk deer versus elk behavior. Have you ever walked through the woods, heard a sudden rustle, and watched a deer vanish like a ghost into the trees? Or stood in awe as to massive elk-locked antlers in an all-out primal showdown? What makes these two creatures so different in how they act, interact, and survive? It's not just about size, it's about personality, instincts, and social style. Let's start with deer, those fleet-footed phantoms of the forest. If deer were high schoolers, they'd be the quiet honor students who sit near the door, always ready to bolt when something feels off. Skittish by nature, they thrive on caution. One wrong step, one creak of a twig, and they're gone, bounding away with gravity-defying leaps that would make an Olympic hurdler jealous. I once watched a white-tailed deer clear a 5-foot fence like it was stepping over a puddle. Deer are masters of solitude. Many species, especially smaller ones like the chital or the roe deer, prefer to keep their circles tight, often traveling solo or in very small groups. This low-profile lifestyle helps them stay under the radar in predator-heavy landscapes. They're constantly scanning their surroundings, ears twitching, muscles tense, ready to explode into motion. You'll rarely catch a deer off guard. They're like the ninjas of the woodland world. Now let's shift gears to elk. If deer are introverted escape artists, elk are confident, social beasts who aren't afraid to throw their weight around. Elk are herd animals, and when the rutting season, that's mating season for the uninitiated, kicks in during the fall, things get intense. Bulls gather harems of females and defend them like gladiators. It's not just loud bugling that echoes across the valleys, they physically battle, crashing antlers with thunderous force to prove their dominance. I'll never forget standing at the edge of a meadow in Yellowstone and watching two massive bull elk face off as the sun set. The sound of their antlers smashing together echoed like a baseball bat hitting a steel barrel. It was wild, raw, and deeply moving. The loser limped away, the victor bugled into the dusky air like a rock star, announcing his encore. Compared to deer, elk are bolder, more territorial, and surprisingly persistent. They don't spook as easily, and they'll stand their ground if they feel challenged. That's not to say they're reckless, they're still prey animals, but they seem to have a bring-it-on attitude, especially the males during the breeding season. So which is the smarter survivor, the shy, agile deer that avoids conflict and lives by stealth, or the bold, social elk that faces challenges head-on? Personally, I admire both. Deer impress me with their agility and alertness. Elk amaze me with their strength and raw charisma. One relies on speed and silence. The other counts on strength, strategy, and numbers. If you ever get the chance to observe, both in the wild, pay close attention. Watch how a deer freezes and flicks its tail before darting off. See how an elk bull keeps his harem close, bugles into the crisp air, and dares another male to come closer. These behaviors aren't just survival tactics. They're a window into the soul of two remarkable species, each with their own way of navigating the wild world. So next time you're in elk or deer country, ask yourself, will you be the shadow silent deer, or the bold-hearted elk calling across the canyon? Clash of the antlered titans. Who would win, the nimble deer or the muscular elk? Picture this, a quiet forest clearing at sunrise. The air is crisp. A rustle in the brush reveals two figures, one sleek, light-footed, and ready to bolt. The other, broad-shouldered, eyes locked forward, antlers wide and gleaming. Who's walking away, and who's backing down? If we're talking speed, agility, and the ability to vanish before danger gets too close, deer take the crown. Their strategy is straight from the playbook of survival: don't fight if you can flee, and they're really good at it. I've watched a white-tailed deer zigzag through a thicket like a living pinball, leaving a confused coyote in the dust. If there were a forest version of parkour, deer would be the undisputed champs. But let's not underestimate the elk. When it comes to raw strength, presence, and the ability to take a stand, elk rule the field. A full-grown bull can weigh more than 700 pounds, with antlers that span up to 4 feet across. These aren't just for show. During the fall rut, bulls clash with bone-rattling force, using their antlers like medieval jousting lances. I once stood less than 100 feet from two elk bulls squaring off in the Lamar Valley of Yellowstone. The ground literally trembled beneath their hooves. That wasn't just a show of power, it was warfare. So, what happens when speed meets strength? If it's a head-to-head physical contest, my money's on the elk. That bulk, the antlers, the sheer determination, they're built for combat. A deer, no matter how agile, isn't designed for close quarters fighting. It's more like a skilled escape artist than a brawler. But here's where it gets interesting. In the wild, brute force doesn't always win. Survival often favors adaptability, awareness, and knowing when to run rather than rumble. Deer excel in this arena. Their lighter frame and acute senses make them much harder to catch. So while the elk may dominate in a toe-to-toe showdown, the deer might outlast in the long game of survival. It's kind of like comparing a heavyweight boxer to a professional sprinter. One could knock you out cold. The other could vanish before you even raise your gloves. Both are masters of their element. Personally, I admire the elk's bravery and strength. It's hard not to be awestruck when you see one standing tall, steam rising from its nose on a chilly morning. But I also respect the deer's cleverness and grace. There's a quiet beauty in how they move, how they calculate risk, and how they almost seem to dance with danger rather than confront it. So here's the question. If you had to bet on one in the wild, who would you choose? The powerful, battle-ready elk or the quick-thinking, fleet-footed deer? One fights, one flees, both survive. Which one would you be? I'd love to hear what you think. Let the antler debate begin. If you're loving this wild showdown, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another animal face-off. Got a favorite in this deer versus elk battle? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all, and I'd love to hear who you're rooting for. Team Nimble Deer or Team Mighty Elk? Let's talk nature, let's talk survival, and let's get wild together.